Okay, let's unpack this. We are tackling a topic today that's, well, it's highly sensitive, but absolutely crucial to the whole mission of education. We're talking about academic dishonesty.
Mm-hmm.
And that means, everything from maybe simple cheating, copying answers on a test, all the way through to pretty sophisticated plagiarism or even fabricating data in research.
And our mission today, it's a bit complex. We really want to dive deep into the forces behind it, the structural forces, the psychological ones, the institutional pressures that actually drive students toward these actions.
Right.
We want to get past just saying it's wrong. We need to understand the why, because only then can we really focus on effective, evidence-based ways to prevent it, to actually build a genuine culture of integrity rather than just, policing the failures.
Exactly. Because our sources, and we've looked at a whole stack of reports, guidelines, behavioral research, they all seem to paint this picture that this isn't just about individual kids making bad choices, is it?
Not at all. It's really a systemic challenge.
Yeah.
It's often driven by this pressure cooker environment that students find themselves in.
So we need to really dissect the problem, understand its scope, get into the roots, identify the signs, the symptoms, and then hopefully build up a kind of comprehensive toolkit for solutions.
Okay, so to start, let's just be really clear about what we're talking about. Academic dishonesty. It really covers any behavior that's intended to get an unfair advantage in an academic setting.
Right.
Our source material lays it out pretty clearly. Specific things like copying answers during exams, that's the classic one, plagiarizing, submitting work that isn't yours without citing it properly, fabricating or falsifying research data, which is a big deal at higher levels, and also using unauthorized assistance. And that last one, well, it's getting trickier all the time with technology, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. And here's what seems to be the core conflict, the real problem for just millions of students everywhere. This behavior, it seems to stem from this really potent mix of, well, fear, huge pressure, and often just not being prepared. Students are basically, maybe even unconsciously, compromising their own intellectual integrity because they're frantically chasing marks or rankings or, what society expects.
Yeah.
And in doing that, they completely lose sight of the real point of education, which is actual learning, right? Gaining skills, developing character. That's supposed to be the goal.
It becomes this kind of transaction, doesn't it, where the short-term win, the good grade, feels like it justifies how you got it, but the long-term value, the actual learning, the ethical growth, that gets completely lost.
Yeah.
When a student takes that shortcut, their whole focus shifts. It's not about mastering the subject anymore. It's just about hitting a metric no matter how they got there. And that's the crisis we're trying to address today.
Okay, so we've sort of defined the territory, the stakes involved. Let's move into section 1, because this is where we really start digging into how complex the causes are. Like you said, it's not just one thing. It seems to be multi-layered. There's internal anxiety. There's the school structure. There are these deep-seated messages from society. So we have to look at these, 3 distinct pillars driving dishonesty.
Right. Let's start inside the student's own head. With the internal drivers, these are the psychological factors, the student-centric things, the immediate pressures that might lead someone to look for that shortcut when they feel like they're in a crisis.
And the biggest one, the one that comes up again and again in the sources, seems to be just this intense fear of failure, that anxiety about performing poorly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When that performance anxiety gets too high, it's like the brain just goes into survival mode.
Yeah.
The student feels trapped, and they might start seeing cheating or taking some kind of shortcut, not really as a moral failing, but almost as the only way out, the only escape from what feels like catastrophic public failure, or maybe letting their parents down.
And that connects pretty tightly to low self-confidence, doesn't it?
It does. If a student genuinely doubts their own ability to do the work, especially under pressure, like in a timed exam, they're much more likely to look outside themselves for help. Quick help.
Right, looking over someone's shoulder or trying to find answers online.
Exactly. They're relying on external validation or sources because that internal well of confidence just feels empty.
And then there's the classic one, the behavioral cause that often sets up the panic in the first place, procrastination.
Ah, yes. Putting things off.
Yeah, leaving it too late. That lack of preparation time seems like a direct pipeline to looking for unethical options, doesn't it?
It really is highly predictable. When a student hits a major deadline or faces an exam and they've barely prepared, That time crunch creates what you could call a moral emergency.
A moral emergency. I like that framing.
Yeah, they feel like they've run out of ethical options. And suddenly that shortcut, that dishonest act, it starts to look like the only rational choice just to survive the situation.
But it's not just internal psychology, is it?
Mm.
There are social mechanics involved, too,
Mm-hmm.
which is really crucial.
Very crucial. We see peer influence playing a massive role. It's when cheating gets normalized within a peer group, that's where the ethical hazard really emerges.
So the everyone does it mentality.
Exactly. If a student perceives, maybe even wrongly, that everyone cheats or that you have to play the system to succeed academically, that makes it much easier for them to engage in what behavioral scientists call moral disengagement.
Moral disengagement. Okay, break that down for us. That's the sort of cognitive trick, right? That lets students compromise their values but still feel okay about themselves.
That's basically it. It's how they rationalize it to themselves. It happens in a few ways, often at the same time.
Like what?
Well, they might engage in denial of responsibility. It's not my fault. The system made the test way too hard. Or they might blame the teacher or the test itself. The instructor is totally unreasonable, so I basically deserve to pass this way. Or, and this one's really interesting, they might appeal to a higher loyalty, like helping a friend cheat. The loyalty to their friend group feels more important in that moment than their commitment to academic rules.
So they frame it as a small favor.
Right. A small favor or just common practice, not a serious ethical breach. It allows them to sidestep the moral implications.
That's a really powerful rationalization engine working there.
Hmm.
Okay, so if the student's internal stress is kind of the fuse, then the environment, the school, maybe even home, often provides the powder keg. Let's look at how the institution itself, maybe completely unintentionally, creates these opportunities for misconduct. This brings us to the environmental and institutional factors.
Yeah, this is huge, and it often starts with the most significant external pressure, excessive academic pressure, this overwhelming focus on getting perfect grades, high marks, rather than on actually understanding the material or putting in the effort.
And institutions can signal this pretty loudly, can't they? Maybe constant ranking lists, parent notifications that just hammer on class rank, or structuring everything around high-stakes, standardized tests.
Absolutely. When the whole institutional culture screams, rank and test scores are all that matter, students internalize that message. It becomes toxic. The score is the only thing that counts, which naturally just fuels that desire to find shortcuts.
Yeah, get the score by any means necessary.
And then you have the institutional gaps, places where the safeguards are just weak. Well, inadequate supervision during exams, lax protocols, maybe not bothering to use different versions of tests, or just generally lenient monitoring. It creates a low-risk environment for cheating.
And if the risk of getting caught feels low,
the temptation goes way up. We'll talk more about Asen's theory later, but basically, low perceived risk dramatically increases the intention to cheat.
But it's not just about catching them, is it? The structural problem seems deeper. There's often this lack of value education.
That's a critical point. If schools aren't explicitly talking about ethics, reinforcing integrity, using case studies, if they just assume those values are somehow magically present, they're often missing.
Right. I saw that the CVSE guidelines from 2023 specifically emphasized integrating ethics and honesty into the curriculum for exactly that reason.
Yeah.
These values need active teaching, not just assuming kids pick them up.
Precisely. They need to be taught and reinforced purposefully. And of course, we absolutely have to spend some serious time on technology misuse. This is the big modern factor.
The AI elephant in the room.
Exactly. Easy access to AI tools, vast amounts of online material. It's fundamentally changed the game for academic dishonesty. It's not just about passing notes anymore. It's sophisticated digital assistance.
And the critique here isn't just AI makes plagiarism easy, right? It's more nuanced. AI actually changes what we mean by plagiarism.
That's the tricky part. Is using an AI to brainstorm ideas plagiarism if you write the final text yourself? Is that okay? Or is the real ethical breach using it to completely bypass learning fundamental skills like how to structure an argument or draft an essay?
Where's the line?
And detection is incredibly difficult. Institutions are really struggling to tell the difference between a student using AI responsibly, maybe as a research assistant, versus one who's just cutting and pasting an entire essay generated by a machine.
Right.
So you have this low perceived risk of getting caught, combined with the speed and often surprising quality of the output. It makes AI a hugely tempting form of unauthorized help. It demands totally new ways of teaching, assessing, and especially focusing on digital literacy.
Okay, that covers the student and the institution. Finally, let's zoom out to the broadest level of influence, the socio-cultural factors. This is like the background noise of society dictating what success looks like, and maybe subtly giving permission to chase results at any cost.
It's that pervasive competitive mindset. Society often glorifies high rank, top achievements, getting into elite universities or companies. This pressure is everywhere.
And if society constantly rewards the highest achievers with the best opportunities, regardless of how they got there.
That sends a very clear and frankly toxic message to students. The outcome is all that matters.
Which leads straight to that cultural belief that results matter more than effort. Yeah.
If success is only measured quantitatively, a grade, a percentile, a rank, then things like effort, learning from mistakes, resilience, integrity, they start to look like secondary concerns, maybe even just roadblocks in the race to the top.
Unnecessary obstacles.
Yeah. And you see this external pressure get internalized through constant peer comparison. Students are often taught, maybe implicitly, to measure their own worth by how their grades stack up against their classmates, instead of focusing on their own personal growth, their own learning journey.
That constant comparison must be exhausting.
Yeah.
And toxic.
It really is. It just fuels that competitive pressure, pushing them towards shortcuts simply to keep up with some unrealistic, externally defined standard of what success is supposed to look like.
Wow. So when you combine all three, that internal fear, the institutional focus on marks, and the external societal pressure for achievement,
Yeah.
you really create this powerful
A
system.
self-sustaining system almost.
Yeah, where academic dishonesty can start to feel, from the student's perspective, not like a moral failure, but almost like an unfortunate necessity, just a survival mechanism in a system that feels rigged. Hashtag 2-3. Recognizing the indicators in theoretical context. Okay, that framework is really robust. It helps us understand why this happens. Now let's shift gears slightly in section 2 and talk about recognizing the symptoms. How does all this pressure actually manifest? We need to look at it from two key perspectives: the student's internal experience and what teachers might actually observe. Hashtag symptoms and behavioral indicators.
Exactly. And starting with the student's perspective, the irony, as we touched on, is that while cheating might feel like a short-term fix for academic stress, it often just swaps it out for deep ethical stress.
Right.
The source material highlights intense anxiety or guilt before assessments as a key emotional sign. The student knows they're compromised ethically, and that hidden cost creates a lot of internal conflict.
They might also constantly try to justify it to themselves, right?
Yeah.
Those frequent justifications for dishonest acts, the internal monologue we talked about.
Telling themselves the test was unfair or the teacher was bad or, again, that everyone does it. Just trying to minimize how serious the act actually is in their own mind.
And how does that show up behaviorally?
Often as an avoidance of genuine learning tasks. I mean, why struggle to understand complex material if you think you can just get the answers somewhere else?
Makes sense. Less effort required up front.
Right. And this often translates into a noticeable dependence on classmates for answers, or maybe getting others to do parts of their assignments. Collaboration turns into collusion. They're not engaging independently with the work.
Okay, so that's from the student side.
Yeah.
What about for teachers or educators? What are the signs they might pick up on?
Often it's about a mismatch. A mismatch between the effort they see the student putting in and the final result. The most obvious one, of course, is identical or clearly plagiarized assignments coming from multiple students.
Especially in big classes, that must stand out.
It does. Though now, with AI, spotting plagiarism needs to be maybe more nuanced. It's not just about exact word matches anymore. Teachers might need to look more for consistency in writing styles, depth of thought, originality across different assignments.
Good point. What else?
A classic indicator, highly visible, is that inconsistency between observed class performance and suddenly high test results.
Yeah, the student who never says anything in class struggles with homework.
Exactly. They avoid participation, maybe submit C-level work consistently, and then suddenly, boom, they ace a major high-stakes exam. That suggests sudden improvement without corresponding understanding. It points to a real gap in their genuine knowledge.
And if the teacher tries to probe that understanding, maybe ask them to explain their reasoning or defend their paper verbally.
They might show a real avoidance of oral discussions or assignments where they actually have to articulate and defend the knowledge in real time. Places where they can't rely on external help easily, it becomes clear they haven't truly internalized the material. Hashtag B, supporting research and the theoretical framework.
Okay, so those symptoms connect right back to the causes we discussed, the psychological pressures, the institutional gaps. Now, how does behavioral science help us understand this on a deeper level? Why do these integrity breakdowns happen, and why do these behaviors sometimes seem to stick within a group?
This is where the theoretical frameworks become really useful diagnostic tools. They give us insight into the underlying mechanisms. We've got three powerful ones to consider here.
All right, let's get into them. Starting with Lawrence Kohlberg's theory of moral development from back in 1971.
Right. Kohlberg suggested that our moral reasoning develops in stages, and crucially, many adolescents, and even some adults, operate mainly at what he called the conventional level of morality.
Conventional level.
hmm
What does that mean in practice?
It means their behavior is primarily guided by external factors, specifically by peer norms, community rules, the desire to meet the expectations of their social group, rather than by deeply internalized abstract moral principles like justice or fairness.
Okay, so apply that to a classroom scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say the school rules clearly state cheating is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe the unspoken peer norm, the accepted behavior within their friendship group is we help each other pass no matter what, even if it means sharing answers.
Exactly. The student operating at that conventional level finds themselves caught. Their loyalty to their immediate social group, the need to fit in, to not be excluded, often overrides the abstract institutional rule.
So they help their friend cheat or accept help themselves.
Precisely. The fear of being ostracized by their peers for not helping can actually be stronger than the fear of getting caught by the teacher or the school.
That really highlights the power of the social context. Okay, what's the next theory?
Next up is Eisen's theory of planned behavior from 1991. This one helps us understand that sort of split-second decision-making process that happens right before a student might choose to cheat.
Okay.
Eisen proposed that our intention to perform a specific behavior, in this case, cheating, is influenced by three key factors that the student maybe unconsciously weighs up.
What are the three factors?
First, their own attitude toward the act. Do they see cheating as inherently wrong or maybe as a necessary evil in a tough situation? Second, the subjective norms. What do they believe their important peers think about it? Do their friends do it or approve of it?
And the third?
The third is perceived behavioral control. Basically, how easy or difficult do they think it will be? What's the risk of getting caught?
So it's like a quick internal cost-benefit analysis.
Exactly. Low risk, high reward calculation. If the student already has a slightly lenient attitude, their friends seem to encourage it or do it themselves, hey, just copy mine, and they know the supervision is lax or the detection methods are weak, while the intention to cheat goes way, way up.
The path to the shortcut looks smooth and safe.
Right. It feels low risk and highly beneficial in that moment, making the dishonest action almost feel logical.
Okay, and the third framework?
That's Bandura's social learning theory from 1977. This one emphasizes something fundamental. We learn behaviors by observing others.
Learning by watching.
Pretty much. When students see their peers engage in academic dishonesty, cheating, plagiarizing, and crucially suffer no negative consequences, it powerfully reinforces that behavior as an option for themselves.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Imagine student A gets caught cheating on a small assignment, but maybe just gets a quiet word from the teacher. No real penalty. Student B sees this happen or hears about it. What have they learned?
That the punishment is minimal, maybe non-existent?
Exactly. They've learned that the observable consequence is negligible. This strongly reinforces cheating as a viable, low-cost strategy for getting ahead in that specific classroom or school environment. If dishonesty is consistently seen to pay off or at least not be punished significantly, it teaches other students that it's an acceptable, maybe even smart way to navigate the system.
And this isn't just abstract theory, is it? There's data backing this up. You mentioned a report earlier.
Yes, the ICI Academic Ethics Report from 2020, it's quite stark. It found that nearly 42% of secondary students admitted to some form of academic dishonesty, specifically when they were under exam stress.
42%. Wow, that's nearly half.
It's a huge number, and it really validates these theoretical models. It shows clearly this isn't just a few bad apples. It's widespread, it's systemic. That pressure cooker environment we talked about, it's genuinely leading to mass moral compromise on a disturbing scale.
Which makes finding real, comprehensive solutions even more urgent. #tag3, the price of compromise and consequences. Okay, so we've really dug into the why this happens and how it manifests. Now let's talk about the long game. But what's the actual cost? What does all this mean for the student and for the system down the line? We need to discuss the impact, the consequences that go way beyond just a grade on a report card.
Absolutely. The most fundamental cost, arguably, is the erosion of integrity. When a student consistently chooses shortcuts, they risk damaging their own internal moral compass. Dishonesty starts to feel normal, maybe even like a practical tool for success.
And the sources warn this isn't just a school problem, right? It can bleed into later life.
That's the real danger. This normalization sets a pattern. If you learn it's okay to cheat to get the grade or the degree, you might internalize the idea that cutting ethical corners is acceptable in other situations too. It could potentially extend into professional misconduct later on, fudging numbers at work, misleading clients, stuff like that. It fundamentally weakens your ethical muscle memory.
It sets a really bad precedent early on, corrupting that belief system. And then there's the intellectual cost, which is huge, a weak conceptual foundation.
If you rely on unfair means, you simply don't learn the material properly. It guarantees significant gaps in your understanding.
Right. If you cheat your way through calculus, you don't actually know calculus.
Exactly. And that reliance on external help means the genuine foundational knowledge, the stuff that later courses or your future career will absolutely depend on, it's just not there.
And that learning gap isn't static, is it? It can compound.
It absolutely can. It means future academic challenges become even harder, maybe insurmountable without those foundational skills. This can lead to more anxiety, more poor performance, and potentially feeling the need to find more shortcuts just to keep your head above water. It becomes a vicious cycle of inadequacy.
And just on a practical level, what about the academic record itself?
Well, it suffers a potentially devastating loss of credibility. If that transcript, that degree is built on plagiarism or cheating, it's fundamentally inauthentic.
And that could come back to bite you later.
It could. If you can't confidently talk about or demonstrate the knowledge you supposedly have during a job interview, or maybe for professional licensing, those earlier lies, that lack of real understanding, could eventually get exposed. It could really damage future opportunities.
We also have to talk about the emotional toll, don't we? Even if someone gets away with it, technically.
Yes, this is a really important hidden cost. Even if they avoid detection, the student often carries this heavy burden, the constant guilt, the fear of being caught. It creates significant internal conflict, sustained emotional distress.
Like always looking over your shoulder.
Pretty much. Worrying about the integrity of your past work, fearing exposure. That stress doesn't go away. It just replaces the stress of studying with the stress of deception. And that takes a real toll on mental well-being.
And finally, what does widespread cheating do to the overall school culture?
It fosters a really negative peer culture. Instead of an environment focused on learning together, maybe healthy competition based on actual effort, it can promote this kind of cynical, cutthroat system. Dishonesty becomes the accepted, maybe even expected path to success. It fundamentally undermines trust and genuine collaboration among students. #TV. Practical solutions and strategies for rebuilding integrity.
Okay, so understanding the depth of the problem, how persistent it is, means we can now focus constructively on the way forward. Section 4 is crucial because it gets us into the detailed, actionable strategies. And it sounds like this needs buy-in from everyone, right? Students, schools, parents.
Absolutely. It has to be a multi-pronged approach. We can't just focus on one area. And let's start where the student has the most immediate control: student self-regulation and awareness. The focus has to shift from just punishment to proactive internal change and actually building skills. #A. Student self-regulation and awareness.
And the biggest mental shift needed, it seems, is for students to really embrace this idea of focusing on mastery, not marks.
Yes. Adopting a genuinely learning-oriented approach. The goal needs to become deep comprehension, understanding the why behind things, not just hitting a number for someone else. That requires reframing what success in education actually means.
But that's a mindset shift. What about practical skills?
Practical skills are essential. Students need to intentionally develop strong time management skills. Get organized. The source material is clear. Robust planning removes that primary trigger, the last-minute panic that so often leads to bad choices.
Eliminate the time crunch, eliminate the moral emergency.
Exactly. And they also need to actively work on building academic confidence. How? By learning to seek help instead of shortcuts.
So asking for help, going to office hours, tutoring, study groups as a sign of strength.
Precisely. A sign of intellectual diligence, not weakness. Taking ownership of their learning gaps.
The sources also mentioned some specific mental toolkits.
They did. Encouraging things like integrity affirmations, simple statements to reinforce honesty as a core personal value, and, more tangibly, introducing concepts like the integrity compass.
An integrity compass. Tell me more about that.
It's a framework, really, focusing on 4 core values: truth, effort, fairness, and responsibility.
Okay, so how would a student use that?
When faced with a tricky choice, they can run it through the compass questions. Is this decision reflecting the truth of my own understanding? Have I put in my honest effort? Is this choice fair to my classmates who did the work honestly? Am I taking responsibility for my own learning path here?
I see. It provides a structured way to think through the ethics of a situation.
Exactly. It gives them a tool for daily ethical decision making. It helps them build healthier habits, like consciously trying to replace that panicky cheating anxiety with a calmer preparation confidence. Hashtag be teacher and institutional measures.
Okay, that's powerful for the student.
Yeah.
Now let's shift to the institutional level. What do teachers and schools need to do? These sound like systemic safeguards are needed.
They are. We need measures that actively raise the perceived risk of cheating and, at the same time, reduce the perceived reward of taking shortcuts.
So where does that start? In the classroom.
It starts with the curriculum. Ethics integration, explicitly including moral education, using case studies about integrity, maybe discussing real-world ethical dilemmas in science class or history class. Show students that integrity isn't just an abstract idea, it's a functional skill needed in the real world in their future professions.
Makes it relevant.
Yeah.
What about assessment?
Vigilant assessment systems are absolutely non-negotiable. This means practical things like rotating question papers so students can't easily share answers, randomizing seating during exams. And critically, it means mandatory sophisticated use of plagiarism detection software and maybe proctoring tools for online exams.
So signaling clearly we're watching and cheating is high risk.
Exactly. But it's not just about catching them. There needs to be a pedagogical shift towards a formative evaluation approach.
Formative evaluation.
Right.
Meaning?
Meaning moving away from relying solely on single high-stakes exams that mostly test memorization and are relatively easy to cheat on. Instead, emphasize continuous assessment.
Like what kind of assessments?
More projects, class discussions, presentations, creative tasks, maybe portfolios of work over time. Tasks where you can actually see the student's individual process and understanding develop.
And why does that reduce cheating?
Because it de-emphasizes that one make-or-break test. It spreads the assessment out, forcing students to engage with the material continuously over the semester. It's just much harder to cheat consistently on a series of unique project milestones than it is on one big multiple-choice final.
That makes sense. Anything else institutions can do?
Yes, actively implementing recognition of integrity. Maybe not just academic awards, but character awards, or giving some weight to students reflecting on their own process and integrity in project reports. Reward the honest effort and ethical behavior, not just the final mark.
And perhaps fostering connections.
Definitely. Mentorship programs can be powerful, pairing teachers or older students with younger ones to guide them through academic pressures ethically. Providing positive role models for how to handle stress and setbacks without resorting to dishonesty. Hashtag parental and home-based interventions.
Okay. Student actions, institutional actions. What about the home environment? This often seems to be where that intense pressure originates. So, parental and home-based interventions.
Hugely important. Parents play a fundamental role in shaping their kids' ethical compass from a very young age.
And the biggest thing they can do seems counterintuitive in some ways. Actively de-emphasize marks.
It really is key. The conversations at home need to consistently encourage learning for its own sake. Curiosity, the process, not just the final grade. When a child comes home with a disappointing mark, the first question shouldn't be, why isn't this an A?
But maybe, what did you learn from this? What could you try differently next time?
Exactly, focusing on the learning goal. And parents need to discuss ethics openly and regularly. Talk about honesty, fairness.
And model it themselves.
Absolutely critical.
Yeah.
Parents must model honest behavior in their own lives at work, in the community. Kids learn far more from what they see than from what they're told. Sharing real-life examples of integrity, maybe even times they faced ethical choices themselves, can be powerful.
And what about dealing with the inevitable setbacks, the failures?
Parents need to provide emotional support. Help their children learn to handle disappointment gracefully. Reinforce that a low grade isn't a catastrophe. It's feedback, an opportunity to learn and grow. And related to that, they absolutely must avoid unrealistic comparisons to siblings or friends' kids.
Because that just fuels the pressure cooker.
Precisely. Focus on the child's individual progress and effort. Unrealistic expectations are a direct line to that fear of failure that pushes kids towards shortcuts. Hashtag YHAND systemic and long-term measures.
Okay, we've covered students, institutions, parents. What about the broader systemic changes needed for long-term cultural shifts? Systemic and long-term measures.
Right. Thinking about the whole academic ecosystem, one crucial piece is mandating robust digital literacy training for all students.
And this isn't just how to use a computer, right?
No, it's much deeper. It's about teaching responsible, ethical use of online tools, specifically addressing those nuances around AI, what constitutes misuse, what's unauthorized assistance versus legitimate research. Students need explicit guidance here.
What about formal commitments?
Things like ethical behavior contracts or integrity pledges can be surprisingly effective. Having students actually sign a pledge before an exam, making that public and personal commitment to honesty, has been shown to increase compliance. It engages their sense of personal responsibility.
Tapping into that desire to be consistent with one's word.
Exactly. And to tackle the root causes of stress and potential moral conflict before they lead to cheating, schools really should implement regular counseling and stress management support. Identify students who are struggling early on before they feel trapped.
Proactive support, not just reactive punishment.
Mhm. And finally, to really embed integrity into the school culture, you need broader campaigns. Things like creating peer accountability groups where students encourage each other towards ethical study habits, or organizing school-wide integrity drives, maybe an annual integrity week with debates, discussions on ethical dilemmas, guest speakers continually reinforcing why honesty matters.
It sounds like this holistic approach hitting it from all angles. The student's mindset, the teacher's methods, the parents' messaging, the school's overall culture. That's the only way to really make a lasting difference.
It is. It's about moving away from just reacting to cheating and towards proactively building character and fostering a genuine culture of integrity for the long haul. Hashtag tag outro. So just to sort of wrap up our deep dive today, we've seen that academic dishonesty isn't simple. It's this complex systemic issue, and it's driven mainly by this powerful mix of external and internal pressures, right?
Yeah, that paralyzing fear of failure, the intense focus on just getting the marks, the normalization of shortcuts within peer groups, and all of it amplified now by technology that makes cheating easier and seem lower risk.
And we saw how this pressure shows up as anxiety and guilt and lots of rationalizing for the student, and as those concerning gaps between effort and results for teachers.
And those theories, Kohlberg's idea of conventional morality, Eisen's cost-benefit thinking, Bandura's social learning, they really help explain why these behaviors take root and spread so easily in schools.
But most importantly, I think, we recognize that the solution isn't just about having stricter rules or harsher punishments. It really demands this proactive, holistic approach to developing integrity.
Right. Focusing on mastery over marks, weaving ethics into the actual curriculum, making sure assessment is vigilant but also formative, and having consistent ethical modeling from parents, teachers, everyone involved.
And the relevance for you, the listener, it really goes beyond just the classroom, doesn't it? Understanding these dynamics helps us support integrity in the next generation, sure. But maybe more importantly, it forces us to look at our own lives.
Where do similar pressures exist for us? In our jobs, our careers? Where might we be tempted to take shortcuts that compromise our own integrity or the quality of our work?
Which brings us to a final provocative thought, something pulled from our source material's reflections. We'd ask you to maybe consider this question for yourself. If I'm really committed to my own ethical growth, how do I actually feel when I achieve something honestly, through fair means? And maybe what's one small thing I can do today to strengthen my own integrity, to ensure my own success is truly earned, not fabricated?
That's a really powerful internal compass check for all of us, I think. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.